Well, welcome back. Got to do some wiring loom stuff. Once we start to get the steering column in, we can kind of jam on the wiring loom, get that tucked in. Got to make a few brackets for the sniper. I'm going to put the ignition box, so it's got a CD box for the ignition. I'm going to tuck that in the glove box, so I got to make a little bracket there. There actually was a bracket for the speaker. The optional radio had a single speaker in the glove box that kind of fired down. So I'm going to use that bracket because I don't have a radio and you wouldn't put the speaker there anyway. So we're going to use that space to tuck it. It's about the same size, so it should let us tuck that CD box. And then there's a big hole in the firewall right here, right behind the glove box. So the wiring loom that comes out of that CD box should be able to come forward. And then we should be sitting pretty good. Anywho, enough yakking. Let's get cracking. That should let us probably switch to our gas pedal and throttle linkage. Because we switched to the sniper, we can't use the factory linkages that went all the way to the carburetor. But I do have one of the low car cables. And interestingly enough, it does have the swivel ball on this end, which I can pop off and drop on the swivel ball on this end for the linkages. So we don't actually have to drill anything in the firewall, and we don't have to cut anything on this pedal. We can just remove this swivel ball. It'll focus on that. And this guy's got a matching swivel ball on him. This one originally went to a linkage. It was all rod driven, but we should be able to put that guy on there, and we'll have to make a bracket for the firewall engine side to snag this adjustment nut somewhere down here, or down here, because when you push the pedal, this goes up, sits like this. So then when you push the gas, that guy goes up. So the cable will have to run downward, then up to the fuel injection, which is fine. There's plenty of room and there's plenty of cable, so it'll actually keep things pretty tidy. So I think that's probably going to be next, but we'll dig out some steel and try and cut out a bracket, kind of like this fella. I started to mark him off, so it's just got to clear that arm, but then we can mount it on the firewall side. So I got my gas pedal. It's kind of handy. It gives you the exact hole mounts, because we're going to piggyback off of that. So I just got this notch cut out to clear the mechanism, basically the mounting on the firewall. I do need it to dogleg over a little bit more. I can't, I can't run this edge down. I've got to bring it over because of the ball mounting is actually shifted over from those bolts. So realistically, I do need another inch or so on these, off these tabs, which I think I can do even with this piece of steel. I think it'll be wide enough to, this is just a scrap I had left over. So basically got to punch out these holes, carve out this radius, and block that out, nibble that tab off. Going to have to leave this one a little bit longer, and then we'll fold it up roughly about here. But as long as we leave some extra, we can just bend it, and then we can shape that tab to whatever we feel like looks aesthetically pleasing. Poke a hole in it for the throttle cable to come through, and then we should be able to give her a quick sandblast and a lick of paint and see how she fits up. Should be enough steel to try a couple versions if we need to, but I think as long as we leave, like I say, kind of about that inch worth, it should give us enough, because this is the over. Yeah, so as long as we balance that guy out, it does leave us plenty. So basically, if we can add a marker. Come on. So basically, as long as we kind of keep this mark even with our edge, square it up, That'll leave us enough on the bottom side to bend it, and we should be good to go. Yeah. Whoops. And just to get it rough, that should be about an inch. Yeah. So this side is cut pretty straight. This side's got a little bit of a wonkiness to it. Let's see if this guy makes it through. I think that's right? So if you cut him out, we're going to bend him back. That is the side we want to bend. Yep. So this is our firewall side. There's my punch. There's my other punch. He can kind of get rounded and prettified. Curious to see how he landed. Yeah, pretty close. So we can trim that to make it look nice. We'll probably punch a couple holes with the step drill just to give us nice round corners, and then we can nibble out in between. And then this side's got to fold away when we know what height we need based on our cable, which is so our cable will drive what height we need for our bend. Basically, we do have some adjustments, so we'll want to leave some room, but it is going to pull up. So we just need a little bit of clearance there as far as if this guy sits here, it's going to be there. That bend is going to be, doesn't have to be anything super precise, but it'll probably be about here. One last thing I'm going to do is just check clearances on the firewall side to make sure we have room to bend it lower. So that's about 3 fingers below that mounting bolt. Should have room. I think it's pretty open there, but we'll just sneak peek. Okay. So I relocated outside just to get a little sunshine and keep some of the mess out of the shop. Got the rough cut in, kind of looks like a dinosaur. So this side faces the firewall. We're going to have to bend him out. It does match up with our gas pedal bracket. Basically there's going to be a firewall in between, so it is going to get pushed out a little bit. But if we take our carb side fitting, that just fell off. It's basically the same on the gas pedal. So I did end up ordering another one of these guys, just basically it is intended to be the carb sides because it has that pivot point. But you should snap on. Go, little fella. A different size by just a skosh. If you are, you're not much. It might be. How about that? Looks like I'm probably drilling him out and using the stud. Well, minor tweak of plans, since we had to drill that out anyway. I think what we may get away with is the original clevis, basically. So it actually fits pretty nice onto that hole that it came out of. It's still going to be the same mechanism where it's going to be a pull. So we do need this bracketry to come down and give us our mount point for that cable coming straight down. But it will just give us that matching setup there, so not a big deal. It'll work. So basically it gives us a little bit of wiggle room here. This guy's in line with his spot. Doesn't have to be super precise, but basically we're looking at somewhere around here, which is somewhere around here, just to give us a little bit of room. Just a little bit above our original guess, so not too shabby. So just kicked in a 90-degree bend on that guy. Go out from the firewall like that. So we'll just need to mark straight down from where our cable pull is going to be, give us an idea where our hole is going to be. So basically we got to trim that out to make it look not like a giant foot. And we need this dimension, this dimension, easy enough. So I ended up just throwing some hardware in there just to hold it. It's a little easier to get this guy. And can also go get that guy, although we are going to push him out because there's going to be a firewall, there's going to be some brackets, so really it's going to be out probably right about here. Just based on what it's going to ship. There is, you know, at the end of the day, it's not going to be too crazy. Actually, should probably come out just a skosh, because it will. Actually, she pulls in, only in. So yeah, I guess we're probably okay on that first guy, because it does kind of bring her back in as you pull. You don't get that full travel. That's all the floorboard in the way. But that should give us our mark. Basically that original one that we had there. We can poke a hole for the throttle cable size, and then we could cut this tab off and give it some sort of support. So we don't want to cut too much off, but we do want to get stuff out of the way. So pull this guy apart, get her nibbled up, cleaned up, drill the hole, and we'll get her back on and see how she looks. Well, there she is. I ended up just cutting a 45, rounding her off. That's about where the hole needs to be for the cable. Otherwise, got her bent up, got her mounting points there. Gonna go give her a date in the sandblaster, give her a lick of paint, let it dry, and then we'll see what we got. Well, we'll see what you guys can see. She's a little bit crowded in here. But that red boot is the gas pedal arm. So there's the bracket tucked up against the firewall. I used a little bit longer bolts on the gas pedal coming through the inside, which gave me kind of studs on the outside, kind of pinch everything together. Had to put a little nylon spacer behind it, holds the bracket off the firewall a little bit, but it's just based on the way those captive nuts kind of like you see on the other spots on the firewall. But it should give us a decent, boy, that is a difficult spot to get into there. It should give us a pretty good location. I'm going to get that snug down and tuck the cable housing back on it and get a better idea how things fit. I can't do it with the little room we got here, so we'll bring it back. So there's a little better view. So brackets all bolted up to the firewall. Got the original kind of clevis bracket down to the adjuster. I do have the long adjuster here just to give me some clearance up top. Otherwise, cable runs kind of in a nice gentle curve, clears everything. Comes around to the fixed mount up top. This is just a standard low-car bracket, came with the cable. I had to tweak it a little bit, had to nibble an angle off just to get it to fit the sniper. But otherwise, return springs fit pretty good. And this has the ball end on it. I just need to trim the cable, cinch it down. I did check travel, and lucky enough, it does give you enough that it should get us full throttle. We'll see when we get it, but I put a little mark on the cable. Probably can't pick it up on camera. Put a little mark on the cable, and it travels over to about where it needs to get to. So we're sitting pretty good. Got a little bit of room for adjustment, but gonna get the cable nippers, nip that off, tuck it in. It's just a little Allen wrench that tightens it down on this end, and we'll see what we got for travel from a physical perspective, and then once we got everything powered on, we can check it on the sniper to make sure it's happy. But I'm gonna go grab those tools. I'm running out of hands, and get that nipped and clipped, and we'll see how our travel is. So there she is, all buttoned up. Comes up to the bracket on the sniper. Got the knuckle on the linkage. Snipped the cable, tucked it in. Got a little bit of clearance to the brake booster or brake master. There's a little low level sensor here. Maybe 1/8 of an inch clearance, maybe 1/4. But room is room. But otherwise, got a good cable angle coming through. Had to tweak the bracket a little bit. Had to nibble a little corner off as well to get it to fit the sniper. I think this is made for a carb, but it's what it came with. Otherwise, put the fixed end up top just to give me more clearance. When you do full throttle, you do need that room here. When you use the adjuster bracket, it tended to get in the way. And there's plenty of room down below. So no real worries there. Otherwise, I did manage to lose the little pin. I've just got a 1032 bolt in there now just so I can test things. I gotta go run to the store sometime, pick up a pin for that clevis, so it's not rubbing on threads. But otherwise, bracket turned out pretty good. It's out of the way, clears everything. Cable's out of the way, clears everything, runs up nice. Around the corner, the return springs seem to sit pretty good. And I do get full travel, so if I reach through the vent and give her the onions, that is full travel. I'm at the stops on the carb, or the sniper. So as you can see, there's only just a little bit of room there between the fitting that goes on the linkage and the bracket. It's just a matter of using the bracket I had. Obviously, if you make a different bracket, you can push it back and you got more room. But otherwise, that is full travel on the sniper. That is full travel on the pedal. Kind of see it on the. There's your. Oh, if I can reach my arm through the vent. Oddly enough, you can reach your arm through the kick vents if you don't have them on yet. But yeah, there we go. We got pretty good travel. Pretty good. Time yourself into the muffler there, buddy. Everything sits pretty good. Everything's pretty snug. There's a little bit of flex in the bracket, but nothing that's going to cause any problems. Everything should be pretty well snugged up. Pretty good travel. So get this guy out, right? So we're sitting pretty good there. We do have a steering column. I did hook up the battery, and I do have blinkers and that kind of stuff, so all those plugs are doing what they're supposed to do. I've just got a jumper here because that goes through the instrument cluster, and that drives your feed through the ammeter. If you don't have that in there, you're not going to get any circuit. But otherwise, we got 3 pedals, so that's good. Everything's kind of tucked in there. So that's kind of a milestone. Push it in. Good to get all that done. I do need to bleed the clutch and the brake. So that'll be some work to do ahead. And I'm stuck waiting on the insulation for those heater hoses so I can get those in there. It'd be really nice to get that fuel tank in and buttoned up and fuel lines, because then we're pretty close to being able to hit the key, have her fire, and kind of have things the way they're supposed to be instead of temporary running. But feeling pretty good there. Going to leave the dash cluster out, like I said, so I can reach in there and do some of that heater work. So I think next up we're going to jump over and build another bracket for the Sniper Hyperspark CD ignition box. I think we're going to tuck it in the dash up on the glove box there, but we're going to need to see if we can fabricate up a bracket, see what we can do. So just a quickie for this guy, a piece of scrap steel I had left over from the bodywork. This is the speaker bracket that goes in the glove box. It's got three studs on the bottom. Basically, I'm going to mount that guy kind of in the same spot. He's going to be vertical, so we're going to have to break this guy up, and then I'm going to break this little bit of extra surplus over, basically to stiffen it up, make it a box, box loosely. So just going to have to pop those 4 holes for the Sniper. I'm going to have to match up. I'm only going to be able to use 2 out of the 3 based on the wiring loom. So going to knock those 2 holes in the bottom. That'll be enough for this guy. He's not going to go dancing away, especially if you box it. And then we should be able to give it a lick of paint and same deal, pop it in the glove box and kind of route the wiring through the same spot that the firewall goes out. The main loom goes up the firewall. So I'm going to mark the holes, poke a few through. I'm going to have to match up these guys, and then we'll throw in the vise, bend a couple corners, and see what we got. Well, there's a rough start. Got the holes marked. Figured I'd wait until after bending, otherwise they're going to create a weak point when you break it. But otherwise, Sniper sits, your CDI box sits in there pretty good. Got this flange in this corner. Going to have to weld it. Just that'll stiffen things up so she doesn't wobble around. So all in all, that's going to be about all we need. Got to poke the 2 holes for the bolts that go in the glove box. Got to poke the 4 holes there. Going to run her through the blaster just to get the scuzz off. And then we'll give her a little zip with the welder just to close that up. So I got a quick little bracket, nothing too special. Fits the CDI box pretty well. I ended up just tapping the holes in the CDI box. They were the exact size for an M6 tap. So just tuck that on there. Easy enough. Not like you're going to be pulling it. Wow. Not like you're going to be pulling the CDI box a whole lot. Then I just got a couple bolts underneath that I got to dunk in, and we can drop her in the glove box. Well, there it is, all nestled in its new home. That's the plug for the troubleshooting light. It's weird that they used a little 110 style plug, but they don't use that outlet in Japan, so it was one of those things. I am going to pull the loom and reloom it, probably with some Testa tape, as I figure out what I need to do there, but it gives me at least a dimension to work from. I could probably have slid it back just a real little bit. I do have a little bit of room on the plate if I want to poke 2 new holes. I can slide those tabs back. There's about you can just get your fingers behind it right now, which isn't terrible, but yeah, you could slide her back about a ½ inch to an inch. I don't think it's going to interfere with anything on the glove box door. There is a little dingle cable here, but I don't think it's going to bother anything. If it does, like I say, we can slide that back a little bit, but we'll see as we go through. Otherwise, slowly chipping away at the Sniper harness. As you can see, she's getting dark outside. Think I've got a plan as far as what's going to come across. I ended up unlooming their loom because they did have some kind of interesting stuff where they had like the relay for the fuel pump, and it was going to land kind of up in the middle while the fuel pump's way down there. There's no point in running wires all the way up there just to run back down. So I depinned that. That's what this plug is. And I think I'm probably going to dunk that relay underneath the battery tray here. I've got some bolts I can take off or key off of. And then it's just kind of a nice short shot from the battery to the relay to the fuel pump. So I think that's the plan. I'm going to kind of slowly work things around. We'll get you on the rack probably tomorrow and start to tape this up, figure out where our connections are, figure out what we got to repin, and then once we get everything good, we can loom it up, and it should look pretty nice and tidy, but we will see. So chipping away in the land of wiring, trying to take the old spider web of Holley wiring and get it looking presentable. Started over here, just bundled up all the mains coming out of the sniper. All this is going to get, kind of the Tessa tape to match the factory harness wherever we got her. She's over here. So I'm just using regular tape just to get things where they belong. The O2 sensor kind of runs down and around. That's really the only thing that goes that way. Got these two big plugs. Just kind of tucked them back here. I think they will sit pretty nice. Most likely we'll probably zip tie them up to this bracket. This bracket actually used to be over here. I just ran the hose a little bit shorter. I'm not sure why they gave it such a long run of heater hose there. It clears everything as far as I can tell. I dunked the air cleaner and stuff back on. But if you run a shorter piece of hose, this bracket works here that used to be over here. I don't know. I'll take it. That freed up this hole kind of by accident. I hadn't planned on it. But it is a good place to tuck their factory fuse. So I did leave that. I did end up unlooming all their stuff. They had some of it tied together, but it didn't really make sense for what we needed. But in general, got a nice clean bundle coming out of the sniper, a couple running over. We'll be able to tie these up nice. One is going to split off here, going down to the distributor. It's just a couple wires, so that'll end up kind of tracking pretty good. We'll have one bundle that runs up to these existing wire loom clips. I think these were used for smog vacuum lines, so I think we'll be okay using them as wire looms. If not, we can kind of make everything run together happy, but I think we'll be good there. I do need to pull it off and solder up a joint here. These are all the switched 12 volt, and the other one I have to solder up is this white pair for the coil signal, I believe. I tried to pin it into this, but the pin kit they give you for this connector doesn't work with this connector. For some reason the pins don't slide in and click. They're too wide, even though they look like they should fit. It is the right part number for that kit. I don't know why. They didn't send the plugs for when you depin the other ones as well. So the depinning did work. This used to have about 12 wires coming out of it. I got rid of all those. They're kind of your ins and outs. I don't think I'm going to need any of them. I may look to try and run an oil pressure sender, because it would be nice to have that in the data logs, just to have the actual oil pressure versus the, yep, looks good. But that's a little finicky, and I can always go back and do that later. Otherwise, main pack is going to run kind of down this corner. There's going to be a chunk that runs up to towards the battery. It does need some direct feeds. And I am keying off of the old 12 volt switch that went to the igniter. It should work for what we need. It should be clean. It's a good heavy lead. They actually already had a extra barrel connector there, so I'm just using that barrel connector. They also had a eyelet. I just ended up wrapping that up to keep it. I didn't want to modify the factory harness too much, so I just tucked that existing eyelet under and gave it a wrap, so I didn't have to modify it at all. And then I just used their existing Canon plug, barrel plug, whatever you want to call it. So didn't have to modify that harness there, but that'll give us our 12 volt switched, and it is on when you hit the key to start as well. It doesn't get interrupted when you go from on to run, or run to start, which is what you need. And that'll also give me the 12-volt switch to go to the fuel pump relay. Originally they had it kind of dangling up here, and it was just kind of messy. I ended up delooming all of that, ran the switched ground, so this is the blue switched ground, that's all they're keying off of for the fuel pump relay. I'm going to tuck it up under this battery tray. There's a bolt I can use to tuck that relay under there. It's going to give me a nice run for this guy to come up. This guy will be the 12-volt switch that'll go to that relay, and then the two will run back to the fuel pump there. Keeps everything down where the fuel pump is, instead of running it up on the firewall just to come back down. So again, I just ended up using a couple slip plugs there to run back to the fuel pump, barrel plugs I guess. Kind of matched like a factory harness would have been, where they do the male and the female. It'll work for that guy. It'll let me unplug it if I need to. And then we'll be able to tag onto that relay and come up. Should keep everything pretty clean. The CDI box, I'm coming through the existing grommet next to the main factory harness. I did kind of just deloom that as well and kind of tie it together. They kind of had like 2 or 3 different harnesses there. I tucked it all into one. As before, the CDI box, I did tuck it in the glove box. This is where the old speaker mount used to be. Technically MSD and Holley, it's kind of the same box. They say don't put it in a glove box, although this is a little bit bigger. It is open on the top, so it's not fully enclosed. There's actually the speaker hole behind it as well. So we're going to run it and see how it does. Apparently the amperage draw is kind of based on RPM. So if you're turning 8 grand, you're going to burn more amps because you're making more sparky spark. The FJ40, you know, you're not going to be turning all that many RPMs. So I think we'll be okay. But just to play it on the safe side, I did tag in a pair of 12-volt switched again. I'm just going to cap it. You know, basically bend her back and taper off. That will let me actually run a small fan if I need to. I think that'll be the play, just because this location does work out pretty good as far as out of the way. It's easy to mount. Wiring all kind of makes sense. But there's basically a, I don't know if you can see it there. Where is, oh, there it is. So there's basically like a 3 or 4 inch hole for the speaker. If I do have any temperature problems in here, which again, I don't think I will, what I can do is get a small pancake fan, like off a computer. Those tend to run on 12 volts. It's pretty darn close to that form factor. And you can actually push air in or draw air out. There's plenty of space. It's open on top, you know, it comes across. And I'll have the 12-volt wire feed there for the ready. So that'll at least let me kind of prep in case there is any issues. As long as you're looming it in, it's not hard to pull 2 more pair. I can't imagine we'll have problems, but if we do, it's easy enough to push some air through there. I'm guessing it won't take a whole lot. There is about an inch gap behind that CDI box, so it's not pushed up all the way against that hole. So I think we'll be okay. Should get us all prepped. The only other last piece I did, this is the one that runs to the coil. It's going to sit on the fender somewhere about here. I don't know exactly where. I left him separate just in case there's any interference driven through these. I'll just wire loom that separate as much as possible. And then it just lets us route it a little bit easier. But otherwise, I think we're sitting pretty good. I think next steps going to be to unplug this guy a little bit, drag him out so I can solder these up and heat shrink them and get that kind of tidied up. And then we should be able to dunk it back in, plug everything in, and theoretically we should be able to give it a test fire to make sure that everything still works. And that test fire should happen from the old steering column, where we should be able to kick it to actually start it with the key, which will be nice. Another one of those milestones. But that's where the wiring's at. They definitely had, you know, kind of some weird stuff where they had extra connectors and stuff that I just didn't need. So I just plucked those out, and I didn't need that much wire. Helps tidy things up a little bit, but I think it should be pretty hidden. The air filter is going to sit back here, which will kind of hide those big old plugs. I do need to worry about the speedometer cable that runs through here, but I think we'll be okay. It kind of sits over. Everything else is kind of where it needs to be. So, time to do one last sweep. We'll yank this guy out, solder him up, and then dunk it back in and see how we're looking. So this guy's all soldered up. Got all our hots, grounds, trigger wire done. She's hanging a little low, but we'll tuck her up when we actually get a little cable tie there. So everything's run over here. Got our gauge cluster plugged in and hanging over for now. Got the coil plugged in. She's just sitting up top here. We do have our terminal covers, if I can get this guy on with one hand. Apparently I can't. There we go. So I shouldn't bobble around too much. Just going to give her a short run. Otherwise, got these guys all tucked in. I did add a wire loom grommet off the battery tray. That'll tuck down and hold this guy going to our relay. She's going to be a little snug in there, I think, once the fenders are on. But you can't always get to her from the backside. Shouldn't be a common item. Worst case, once I get the fender, as I start to put the fender on, if it looks like it'll be a problem, I can always spin it around a little bit. But we'll leave her there for now. Otherwise, got our grounds run, and then got our switched keyed into our 12 volt switched positive there. Everything else just kind of hanging here, tucked where it needs to be. That loom's going where it needs to. This one's going to kind of follow it. So feeling pretty good there. This guy's just tucked back up in there again. This guy is plugged back in, so he's just kind of hanging out. Obviously all this stuff needs to get wire loomed, but I would like to make sure she does what she needs to first. Well, we'll let you be upside down. So obviously everything's got to get wrapped, but it's kind of tucked in pretty nice and neat. It gives you an idea from this side as well. So everything's pretty well snugged up. But before we wrap it, it would be good to try and make sure that everything's doing what it needs to. So we are in neutral. If we kick the switch on, you can hear the fuel pump run. Sniper did pop on. So good news there. We'll pull our brake. Our brake light even works. And she fires up with the key. How about that? I don't have my oil pressure gauge in there anymore. I did wire in the sender. We're pretty close to dunking the gauge pack in, so without an oil pressure gauge or any of that jazz, won't keep her running. But she fires up real quick, which is really nice because it doesn't even have the timing map really set yet. But that's a pretty big milestone, being able to run her from the key. One last one just for fun. If she fires off. And the gas pedal works. So that's a good thing. Not too big of a surprise. It's linkage, but kind of nice to have that working. I do have the regulator tied in. I saw the volts weren't all the way up, but we do have this whole thing kind of dingled out, so I'm sure she's not getting all of her amperage through there. If not, we'll have to trace that through, because we should get charging pretty quick. So Mike from the future here. Dog ate my homework again. I didn't really have anything where I buttoned up the last of the wiring harness, so we'll give a quick walk through. So did get it all loomed up with the Tessa tape. So that's the main pack coming out of the Holley. So those big harnesses that came out, they're all kind of tidied up. The two fork off like we talked about. So this one is the O2 sensor. So he runs down. You can see the clip in the harness there, and then just the typical O2 sensor runs down to the downpipe. So it actually works out pretty good to come up and over. The dash plug is here. I did run it through where basically the choke cable originally came out. There's a big grommet there. The choke cable and it's the temperature sensor wiring too, I believe. But it is good to keep that plug accessible. That is where you would plug in to use like a full-blown laptop if you need to do any programming or tuning. So it's nice to have that accessible and not tucked away where you can't get at it. Otherwise, you can kind of tuck this piece through that grommet hole and bundle up any extras for where the sniper dash lives. So that kind of worked out pretty nice. Otherwise, runs across like we had it laid out. Once you have it taped up, it is pretty nice. So speedometer cable is kind of in the way now to see. But those two big connectors tuck far in the back. But otherwise everything's loomed up pretty tidy. The fuse comes down like we had her planned. So that's kind of another one that's easily accessible. And then I just ran across. So this is where the factory had I believe they had a hard line for the evap system, because they used to have a big vacuum block over on that fender. Because we're not running any of that stuff anymore, we don't need it. So I pilfered those clips, and they worked out pretty well for the Holley harness. I did end up looming in 2 extra pins coming off of this guy. So you'll see there's the white that runs the coil, but then there's also a green and a gray. I used 2 signal wires coming out to run the evap canister that's hiding down there on the fender. That's the factory location. Normally they've got a vacuum solenoid that worked in conjunction with the emissions box and a thermo sensor that was kind of tucked on the thermostat. So you kind of had all these hoses running everywhere. I ended up doing a little bit of trickery with the Holley and ran an electric solenoid. It's off of like some sort of a modern GM, I believe. So I loomed that in. You have to do a little bit of trickery to get it to work. You need 2 signals, one for temperature and one for throttle position. But you can make it work. So now I'm controlling that evap solenoid here that runs to the charcoal canister purely through the Holley. If people want, I can probably do a separate topic there. Like I say, there's a little bit of trickery. You have to kind of do 2 solenoids based on they don't give you a ton of sophistication on the sniper compared to like their Holley Dominators and like their upper end ones. But it is doable, and it is kind of nice because then you just have the one vacuum feed coming across. I just tied into the PCV valve. So you don't have all the vacuum hoses running around. Like if you do a vacuum solenoid on here, you need a feed from the carb side, and then you need another one for the suction side, and you still need a thermo input. That gets a little bit complicated. In this case, you just got 2 wires, and then this guy just mounted on the fender kind of where they were. So that worked out pretty clean. Like I say, if people are keen to know how that all tied together, I'd have to go back and kind of dig out the wiring diagrams and kind of the parts list. But it is pretty simple. I could walk through the Holley setup as well. There's a little bit in the ECU config. But otherwise, wiring did turn out nice and snug. Everything kind of tucked underneath as we planned. One thing that I don't know if it's on later videos or not, I guess we'll find out, but we'll call it out here. I did run into some interference with things that it was a good idea to get the capacitor, the inline cap, to put on the feed for the CDI box. It did make my regulator a little bit cranky. I talked about kind of plugging the regulator in later. So just a heads up, as you're wiring up your sniper, at least if you're doing a hyper spark, it's probably a good idea just to get the filter cap right away. They recommend it, but they kind of hide it in the documentation. It's not quite as transparent, but definitely a pro tip there. Just get that early, and it feeds in and kind of filters out some of the noise that you get from a CDI box. But otherwise, tucked in pretty clean. Whoops, hood latch. Pretty happy with how it came out. Pretty clean in terms of looking factory without being too obvious. Anyway, that's kind of what we have. Back to the past closer out. So pretty good milestone there. I think that's where we're going to wrap this one. Kind of nice to have that steering column back in, have the wiring harness pretty much tucked back in other than where the fenders are, and being able to kind of reach in, hit that key, and have her fire. So that's pretty darn nice. Obviously waiting on some parts for the fuel tank, and obviously got to wrap a little bit of the last loom stuff. But it'll be nice when the parts come in for the fuel tank, because then you can start jamming on the interior and really get kind of closing things out. Until those heater lines come in, you can't put the fuel cell in, and then you can't put the cap on, you can't put the cap on, you can't put the seats in. But otherwise, pretty happy with that. I'm gonna wrap that up and get her finalized, and we'll probably catch a little bit of that on the next one, but it's pretty minor. Otherwise, hopefully by the time the next one rolls around, we should have parts. Should be able to start slamming that kind of firewall back together a little bit. And then once everything's sorted there, then we can start working that clip forward. So progress, getting closer and closer to having something that you can run and drive, which is a good thing. We'll catch you on the next one, and thanks for watching.